Well, I want to introduce you all to Jenni Catron. Could y'all
Hello.
give her a warm, awesome Collyde welcome?
Thank you, thank you.
And Jenni is the executive pastor at Menlo Park Presbyterian Church in San Francisco Bay Area. She actually was the executive director at Pete Wilson's church, who you'll be hearing in a little bit, but now she's at Menlo Park.
Exactly,
Ooh,
yeah.
Talk about finding your calling. This girl's going. Well, Jenni has also written a book that's actually coming out, and I just got a hold of her advanced reader's copy. It's called The 4 Dimensions of Extraordinary Leadership, and I believe this is, let's put this out where they can get a good feel for it. There we go. Don't fall. All right. I'll just hold that up. And it's coming out December 1st, right?
Correct,
So they can Amazon. Write to Jenni, call her, she'll give it to you.
Right,
there you go.
Whatever it takes,
Okay. Well, Jenni, let's talk a little bit about leadership. And specifically, I guess with the first question, why do you think leadership development is so important to the church?
Sure. I have just such a heart for leadership. I was telling Segun this backstage, and that, before I even knew what the word leadership was, I just had such a deep passion, this deep longing to understand what does a good leader look like. Yeah. And I think, when I was in the marketplace originally, and then I moved into ministry at Crosspoint Church, and it became clear to me that leadership in the church leadership in general, I think, is so important. But leadership in the church, I think, is just extraordinarily valuable. I think just critical. And that I think the mission of the church really is a leadership mission, because leadership is built on this premise of discipleship, which is what the church is all about, the Great Commission. And really, discipleship is about leading others to Jesus. And so it just kind of all gets wrapped up together for me. And I think the significance of us understanding the importance of leadership, the importance of our development as leaders, and then what does that look like as we're leading the people in our congregations? Are we influencing them well? Are we leading them well? Are we leading them to Jesus well? And so I think for the church, the subject of leadership just goes hand in hand with discipleship.
Absolutely. Now, in your book, you talk about what you describe as the 4 dimensions of the extraordinary leader. I love that, extraordinary leader. Yeah. What are some traits of an extraordinary leader? Like, what things would you say are?
So the book is kind of a combination of just my journey of understanding leadership. Again, just this passion to say, what does it look like to lead well? Because there's a lot of people who have had lots of influence in our culture through the years, some of those good and some of those not so good. So what does it look like to be a good leader? What is God asking of us as leaders? And so I would search and I'd look at people throughout history. I'd look at biblical characters, and I would just look for this, like silver bullet of leadership example. And then I found it in one of the most ordinary of places. In Mark 12, where Jesus is talking, he's giving us the great commandment: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And as I began to process that, it occurred to me, what if that is really the foundation for leadership? If the implication of that great commandment is that's all of who we are, heart, mind, soul, and strength, when we bring all of that to our love for God and to our love for others, well, what if we brought those 4 things to leadership as well? What if we loved the people we lead with all of our heart, that relational side of leadership? What if we brought all of our soul, the spiritual leadership? What if we brought all of our mind, the strategy, the planning, the ability to use our intellect to accomplish mission? And then what if we brought strength, which I equate to the vision side of leadership, and that vision is so important to help us stay on mission. And so heart, mind, soul, and strength, that's kind of right there, the great commandment.
I was going to say, I've read that a ton of times. I never thought about it from the leadership. Wow, that's interesting. All right, so I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. You didn't know this was coming. When you talk about extraordinary leaders, who are some extraordinary leaders that you look up to? And for you, you're like, that's the lady, that's the guy, that I love their style. Give us two people you look at.
This is hard. Well,
I almost said 3, so 2's good.
2's good. 2's good.
2's good.
You're going to hear from Pete Wilson, and I'm not just giving him a nod because he was one of my pastors and leaders, but he is a remarkable leader, and we got to serve together for 9 years on staff, I think 12 years. I did 3 years as a volunteer leader before I was on staff, and just somebody who leads from all of those dimensions. And so I was privileged to work under a leader like that. And then back in my music business days, I was 20 years old when I started working at the record company. And And the president of the record company I worked for, I actually talk about his story in the book. His name is Greg Ham. And Greg was one of those leaders that just really believed in me before I knew to believe in myself.
Wow.
The irony of his story is that he was studying to be a youth pastor.
Wow.
And was working in the mailroom of this, small little record label in Nashville, Tennessee. And then they hired him and promoted him. He became the president of the record company, even though he had was on the journey to be in full-time ministry, and God just kind of redirected his course that way. And so here I was as a 20-year-old actually being led by a pastor in a corporate environment. Nice. And so I've been privileged. Those are two leaders right off the bat that have invested in me deeply, and I'm so grateful for.
That's awesome. So take us a little bit more into Jenni. What has been the most challenging personal leadership development that you've gone through for you personally? Yeah.
I think I often say lead yourself well to lead others better. And this was a lesson I think I had to learn the hard way. I'm an incredibly driven person, firstborn, A-type, success-seeking overachiever who wants to rule the world in every possible way. And I often get in the way of myself. And I think leadership really begins with leading ourselves well. And so even as I was framing up the book, before we can really lead others with heart, soul, mind, and strength, we really have to lead ourselves that way. And so the journey for me personally was being willing to, instead of rushing out to lead others, I needed to slow down to lead myself. Slow down to see what are the areas in my heart that God needed to do some work on, which is always part of the journey, right? But I think in our heart to lead and influence others, we need to make sure we're slowing down to say, God, what's the work you need to do in me? And I need to make sure I'm leading myself well before I'm racing to lead others.
Wow. I think we could all benefit from that, right? This whole idea of leading ourselves all. Well, Jenni, thank you so much. Would you all give a warm thank you to Jenni for that? Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Jenni.